Okay, folks, welcome back. Great episode today. Back to some of our roots with trauma recovery. Today, we're looking at a new innovative practice, not just for trauma, but as you'll hear from our guest today, for any kind of patterns, loops that we might be stuck in, limitations that we might be putting ourselves. This style, this therapeutic intervention that Estefana Johnson teaches and educates and treats in is really about going down and getting to the bottom of like, why do we react the way we do, right? Why do certain random things set us off? Like she says, it's for anyone. We want to know, like, why do I keep ending up in that same situation? Why? I know that was a little thing that the person did, but why did I like jump like it was a huge thing? So we're going to talk about that today and this really innovative way that she and the clinicians she's training are addressing this. And I think it's very interesting because as you'll hear us discuss, you do hit limits and ruts and these kind of plateaus with clients. And sometimes you don't know why. And it seems this method is helping get past those. So Estefana Johnson is a licensed clinical social worker and experienced trauma therapist with over 2 decades of experience in mental health. She began her career in 2001 as a behavioral health technician and stepped away in 2005 to teach in Japan. Her diverse background spans multiple roles and settings, including residential treatment for at-risk youth and medical social work, giving her a very well-rounded perspective on mental health care. And as the director of clinical training for Arise Alliance Institute, Estefana Johnson oversees the professional development and training of clinicians on critical memory integration. Her role involves designing and implementing comprehensive training curricula for mental health professionals to enhance clinical skills, particularly in trauma-focused care, PTSD, treatment, and therapeutic interventions. She also develops and delivers trauma-informed programming tailored to the needs of at-risk populations. And we really talk a lot about the individual in her work. She's really committed to empowering the individual, empowering the client. I know you're going to love this interview. Here we go. Estefana Johnson, I'm thrilled to have you here.
It's awesome to be here too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited because, we're getting back to some of our roots here at the podcast to really concentrate this episode on trauma recovery, trauma healing, but also some of the latest methods and maybe some that people aren't as familiar with that are helpful for people for processing disturbing memories and so forth. You're going to explain it all to us. Maybe, we're just talking about them doesn't always do the trick, right?
No, it really, when it comes to trauma, it doesn't.
Yeah. And do you want to say a little bit about that to get us rolling? Like why trauma is so different from, maybe other mental health, diagnoses where we might come in and insight, just talking about it and realizing something might resolve it. Trauma is very different from that.
It is different in the sense that, by definition, trauma typically is associated with an adverse event that could be life threatening. And when we experience something life threatening, our brain stores it differently, right? Because this is a life or death. It's kind of important. So it's like top for sure. You have to go through it once for it to never, ever, ever forget. So there's like kind of the hierarchy of how memory works. If it's life threatening, it's going to recall it for sure. If there's a strong emotion, that's like second tier, right? So that could include happy memories or scared or stressful. The third one is the repetition, trying to repeat something to outcompete the survival mechanism is only going to take you so far. So as long as the threat level doesn't exceed a threshold where that survival mechanism will kick in and override your agency, right? So if you have a person who has anger issues, for example, because they lived in a very violent home or violent environment, bad neighborhood, and the aggression was a protective mechanism, then they can do self-talk, they can do breathing techniques, they can do all these things to regulate their nervous system, as long as the threshold of stress is within the capacity of the skill that they developed. But the
Yeah.
moment it passes that threshold, that survival mechanism is going to kick in
Uh,
and it's going to override. So then we feel like, well, if you know better, you do better. No, that's not how the body works. Like, yes, if it's a knowing problem, but when it comes to survival, our body reacts. It does not get your consent.
right.
you know,
This is
you,
like, this is brain stem. This is nervous system.
yeah,
So
yeah.
a
You
lot
touch
of
a
that.
hot stove. Yeah, if you touch a hot stove, your hand's going to retract without your permission.
Great example. Great example. And I love what you described. It's like there's a certain um, realm of events where yeah we can even like we can do some deep breathing, we can do some
Yeah.
grounding, like but for some folks you can teach them all the grounding practices in the world, and when that, like you said, that threat level is beyond where that's going to help.
Yeah, and
So yeah.
I think one other thing I wanted to add before I forget, because you asked about trauma, and I, if you notice, like when I talk about CMI critical memory, it's not trauma memory, and there's a reason for that, because there's also this misnomer that only trauma experiences impact the now, and that's not true. There are also positive things that you learned as a kid that build your habits that you have in the now. It's like, let's look at a cultural example of kindness or being respectful. When you meet somebody in America, what do? You shake their hand, you look them in the eye. That is what respect is here.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Japan, that's not what you do. It's rude to touch people, right? So you've got to you avoid eye contact, you bow. That is what respectful is there. It was so hard for me to like not, you know,
Go
put my
on in
hand
for
out to
a
shake.
hug.
Yeah, well, in me, I'm like, I'm a hugger, you know, so I'm like, come here, and they're like, you know, like, what the heck is this lady doing? It
Yeah.
That doesn't come from trauma, but it comes from the learned experience. And these are the things that were, I think, getting in the way of the progress in our field, is that we tend to pathologize and we assume the problem has to be obvious, like a
Hmm.
traumatic event.
Hmm.
The problem might be that you got stuck in this way of responding that was appropriate, wasn't really problematic until you're in a different situation, a different environment.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, like take a kind of basic thing that girls, most young girls at a certain age learn that it's better for their survival, like let's say in the classroom or in
Yeah.
many spaces to lean back, be more quiet, they take subtle cues that
Yes.
they're going to do better if they don't always answer correctly, right? And that might work in that atmosphere. Then somehow one might end up in an atmosphere where more assertive, aggressive behavior is more rewarded. So now this behavior that has been really learned, deeply learned, right? Almost where you're swimming in it, you don't really know that you're doing it. You don't know you're being like
Yeah.
passive, right? Like that's the thing about how these things change us. We might not
Yes.
even see them unless they're like pointed out to us by going to a different culture or they're
Yeah.
suddenly not working anymore.
Well, and I read this article, Lara, like just maybe a couple months ago, that was talking about how, it was saying, how do women put themselves in dangerous situations? And it was a study or something that said, if a woman, she's like walking in a dark garage and they see this shady looking character going into the elevator, and even though everything in them says that's shady, like don't go in there, they they're like, that's rude. You're judging a book by its cover, and we're taught to not trust that. We're taught to override that for the sake of looking kind or not looking mean or not. So even with that, they'll go in and then get assaulted, and it's like, you didn't. there's a book, I think it's called The Gift of Fear or something like that, that talks about
Yes.
this intuitive thing that, uh, and that didn't come from a trauma. It actually came from the opposite, from learning, the being kind and considerate, but to a fault.
Yes.
To where you're not trusting yourself, so you don't feel comfortable with this uncle, but you better hug him because you're going to hurt his feelings. So now the adult's feelings are prioritized over the child's trusting of the self for the
Yes.
sake of societal, approval. So
Oh,
these are all critical experiences that drive how we respond. It's not just related to trauma.
yeah, this is touching right now because I have a daughter who's 6.5, and I'm in those moments where like she doesn't like a family member, family friend, and I'm like in that balancing of her autonomy and like some politeness, but you don't have to
Yes.
do this. Like, so just like weighing all those things, trying to recognize her autonomy and support her natural instincts, and give her like tools for how she can feel in herself and not lying to herself, and how we can survive those dynamics.
Yeah, the struggle is real. I mean, I've got a daughter myself. She made it to 17. I'm proud of her. But I remember when yeah, like all extremities intact. We're almost at the finish line. But it was the same thing. I would tell her, like, don't be rude and mean, but hold your space.
Yeah,
Don't feel comfortable. It's okay to say no, thank you. And
yeah.
if the adult's feelings get hurt, they can take a card from one of my, fellow therapists and work on that.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten like generally we're so like afraid of offending,
Yeah.
and we could all like just practice saying how we feel, and also on the other end like taking people's boundaries and not taking them so personally, like we
Yeah, I
want to
think
be
part of
receivers.
it is this concept of boundaries can be very confusing for people. And we do
Yeah,
a lot of that work. I do a lot of that work with my clients, is like, I think it was Gabor Mate or somebody that had given this definition of a good boundary is the point at which I could love you and I simultaneously.
yeah,
If at any point loving you means sacrificing from me, then that's not a boundary, right? That's a sacrifice, and vice versa. And so people think my boundary is you will not do this when I'm around. No, that's control. That's not a boundary. The boundary is when I decide what I'm willing to accept or not accept into my life. It's not a demand on someone else. So if I say, when you speak this way to me, Laura, it hurts my feelings, and I would like to have a better communication with you. Uh, but when I don't want to ruin our relationship by hurt feelings, so what I'm going to do is when you speak that way, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to end the conversation until I can come back, and then we can continue in a way that's respectful for both of us.
yeah,
That's a boundary.
yeah. That's so that thank you for like illustrating the difference between the boundary and the control, because we do get confused.
We do, and then we get disappointed, right? So if you and I have a close relationship, and let's say you're struggling, like it has nothing to do with me, which, you know, like I hate to break it to you guys, but nothing that people do or say really is about you. I know it feels like the world revolves around you, but I promise you, they didn't wake up that morning and be like, I'm going to make their life miserable. How can I do this? They don't have the energy. They're so focused on their own stress and struggles that if they're having a bad day, they're probably having a bad day because they don't feel good inside. They're
It's so
stressed.
true. It's
They're
so
just,
true.
yeah, projecting. So doesn't mean you sit there and you take it, because you've got to choose what you're willing to absorb or not. But it's when we come across someone that's struggling and we personalize it, and then we get into those
Yeah.
no win situations. It's a no win situation.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful. So I'd love to talk about some of the more like interesting ways that and innovative ways that you are helping people to move forward from trauma, or also from these more like subtle traumas that change the way that that we think and our brain functions and how we react. And I think you've had an evolution in the different practices that you've
Absolutely.
worked with for trauma recovery. And, you know, some people are saying, oh, like all we hear is trauma, trauma, trauma. And
I
like,
know.
they don't, I think folks don't realize that this wasn't spoken about for so long. So in some ways it's still very new. And I think trauma recovery is still going through a lot of evolution.
Right. I wish we could rewrite the narrative about trauma and just get to the truth of we all have critical experiences that shape how we view the world, how we view ourselves, how we respond to situations. All of us are different. Some of these experiences are adverse or pretty significant and have to do with life or death. And those ones are very difficult to change whenever with like logic. You know, you can't think your way out of a nervous system response. It's just it's come from a deeper place and your subconscious mind is already stepping in before you're even aware that it's stepping in.
Yeah.
So if that was the narrative, I think that's the difference is trauma in itself is what happens within you as a result of your experience, not the event itself. So you can have this is why people say, well, I had a abusive dad, but I don't act that way. You know, there's so many factors that contribute to something. Or I had a car accident and I never had nightmares or flashbacks. Good for you. That's how your brain works. There's something that your brain does that's different from Sally's brain,
Yeah.
right? And so we're all individual. um Part of that, we tend to pathologize. A lot of people that I work with trauma are don't believe they have trauma. They're just like, that was just another Thursday, you know. I'm like, wait, what happened to you? Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
over it. Okay.
Especially folks with, I think, complex trauma where it just became so normalized.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if we switch and we pivot to understanding the issue differently, not the events that you have gone through, rather, are you fully present and living life in the now and feeling in control of your life, a sense of agency over your life? If you feel stuck in loops, like you say, I want to do this, but something inside me won't let me, or you're over responding to things like, here's a level 2 problem and you come at a level 10, you know,
Yes.
something that is incongruent, then we have an issue. Where it came from, maybe an adverse event, maybe not. You know, who
Yes.
knows? Let's be curious about that. But let's figure out where that critical experience came from so that we can update it and say, hey, body, we're no longer five. We can actually walk away. We don't need to people please, or we don't need to punch somebody because it's illegal in most states. We can actually walk away. You know, whatever it is that your adaptive response, we need to update it.
Yeah. And I think you're covering a lot of people, and that's okay. Many of us, like, you know, on a small thing can feel like our whole identity is being questioned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and at the root of the problem is, are you okay with who you are? Do you feel whole, complete, authentic? And if you
Yeah.
don't, then we have an issue. If you do, then we don't have an issue. Right?
Yeah.
So this is where pathology, when we're trying to say, well, if you went through these events, you're going to be screwed up for life. No, that's not true. Because you might have not gone through any of those events, and yet you can't be happy because you can't be authentic, because in your family you have to be a MD in order to be successful, and you have to
Right.
look a certain way and be a certain size and act a certain, put a certain facade, and you don't feel congruent, you don't feel free to live your own life. That
Yeah.
can be as, you know, anxiety provoking, as life sucking as adversity. So it's
Yes.
about shifting the way we look at what the problem is.
Yeah, because and I think it's also from Gabor Mate's, like you know, the desire to be seen authentically and live authentically. Um, you know, without that, there's a split, and that there's a real harm that's done to the psyche. So if you couldn't live freely and you know, as you are, maybe you couldn't come out to your parents, or they didn't accept you, or, you know, even like you're saying, even like
Yes.
saying that,
Yeah.
you know, I want to be an artist, you know, and you were forced into like a family business or something, you know, there can be a real split and a
Yes.
real breakdown, that is, disabling, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I look at it like you're full. fully dressed in camouflage in a bush, and you're like, I want to be seen.
Yes.
Come out. Show yourself. But you want to hide the parts that you feel are not good enough, or you want to hide what you think is doesn't fit the narrative. Well, that's why you don't feel seen. You have to accept you first so you can be you, so that people can appreciate you.
Yeah, and we should say something about the looping too, because I thought that was a really good point. How, so many of us were like, why am I in this same situation again? Like we find ourselves in the same relational dynamics.
Yeah.
Um, and it's what I find is, and especially with trauma survivors, the whole act of trying to get away from
Yes.
that
Yes.
ends them back up in it.
Yeah, and you're not broken, by the way.
No.
The thing that happens is the way our brains are built. Our brains are built for familiarity. Like it wants to predict. It's a prediction machine, right? So it just so that for efficiency. If you had, like, you ever watch the movie 50 First Dates? Every morning she has to wake up and know who she is and who she married. That's exhausting. You never get to live life. You're stuck in a loop, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to get outside of what you know to discover something different. But most of the time, especially when it comes to trauma, going outside of what you know feels dangerous because you don't know. It's terrifying to go into the unexpected. And this isn't just trauma. Think about people who really wanted to start a new career, but now in your 40s you're like, it'll take me forever to advance. I don't want to go back to school because I don't want to feel dumb. They only want to things that they're already good at. Well, you can't get good at it without being like a novice again. So it's the same thing with trauma. We want to have different relationships or pick better partners, but we don't want to feel like a novice again. But you have to go that way to find a different way. And so to avoid this discomfort of the unknown, you get stuck in the loop of the known. And I tell people, if you see the same gas station over and over, honey, you're driving in circles. Like,
Yeah.
let's let's you have to step outside of what you know, and it can be
What
terrifying.
do we do? Because I actually had that situation yesterday with a client, and she was like, wants to get out of this kind of minimum wage and job, and but is afraid of looking like stupid by going out for a new job. I did a
Mhm.
kind of motivational interviewing, like really exaggerated,
Yeah.
the one side to kind of see what she was saying, what she was willing to give up, based on, maybe a moment of a learning curve. Like, yeah, so you're ready to stay in the basement forever,
Yeah.
because you might make a 30-second mistake. Okay, so, but how do we shift that mindset? Because that's a hard one.
Well, there's multiple ways. I might give them homework to go do something stupid. Go do something that makes you look so goofy, and ridiculous and embarrassing, and get over the fear you're not going to die because you're embarrassed, right?
Right.
Here's the
Right.
issue. You can go at it multiple ways, but what we found often is if those are a little bit more superficial, and sometimes it works, but ultimately we got to get to the root of where this response started.
Yeah.
When did exploration become dangerous? Because naturally, as babies, I mean, you ever seen a baby learn to walk? They look like a dang fool, like just walking around like drunk little people. And never at any point do they say, oh, this is embarrassing, I'm going to stop learning how to walk. They just keep getting up and doing it again, getting up and doing it again. That's how we learn. At
Yeah.
what point did we learn that it was not okay to not be perfect from the start
Yeah.
or not be good enough from the start? Typically that goes to somewhere in childhood, fear of disapproving, fear of not being enough to be accepted, or whatever it is. And if
Yeah.
we don't get to those critical experiences, which is what CMI does, and help rewrite that, reconsolidate, so change the way it's stored, it becomes more challenging to try to go from the surface, right?
Yeah.
Train us to move towards discomfort, you didn't die. Move towards discomfort, you didn't die. That's like the slower way. It can
Uh-huh.
happen, like kind of like desensitization does.
Yeah. It's kind of like
But
exposure. It's a little bit
yeah,
of
like those type of
exposure.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not always, especially when those deep rooted experiences have to do with survival. Like if I messed up, my alcoholic father would beat me. Now your nervous system is going to be like, nope, nope,
Yeah.
we're doing it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there are these like that's like one level. It's a little bit of like a desensitization, like an exposure, which if could work, but if it's rooted to something really deep, it's going to be harder to change the behavior that way. So,
Yes.
is there a looking back? Does the client need to understand where it comes from? Because there's different theories on that as well, right?
Um, so let's let's talk about that, unpack that a second. Understanding here is different from understanding here. I call this knowing, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Knowing goes deeper. Sometimes you know something and you can't explain
Yeah.
why, how, where did that come from? And so when we often, at least how I was trained when I first came into the field, everything was cognitive, right? Everything was about the thought. Everything was about let's find and identify your beliefs. Sometimes you don't even know that you believe something. Like I didn't know I believed that, the eye contact and shaking hands was the only way to demonstrate respect to someone until I was in another country where that's not what they do and it felt different and I'm like, wait a minute, and I didn't realize how ingrained that was in me.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about CMI, critical memory integration, and like what it looks like. Can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. What it looks like is really an internal journey. So if you come to my office, the first thing I tell you is I am not the expert of you. You are the expert of you. You're the only one that can really understand what it's like to have gone through the things that you've gone through. Right? And I can try, but as a human being, we observe and we listen autobiographically, meaning that if you talk about your dog, I think about my dog, and they might be
Mm.
completely different, very different experiences, but that's how we look at the world based off of our experiences. So that's what often leaves a lot of room for misunderstandings and misconnections. Misattunement is what we call in therapy. And so this would come up a lot in sessions when we have a certain modality and this is what it says we should do, but then the individual seems to be moving and then they get stuck and
Yeah.
harder. And there's something that's like not quite attuning. And those are the issues that we were looking at. So with CMI, our goal really was to figure out how does this happen most organically? Right. So before I used to think that, okay, there's a trauma, a person's having the flashbacks of this event, the car accident, and that's the problem. Let's make it not hurt so that the brain can digest it, and then it's done. So previously in other modalities, that was the target. We resolved the nightmares or the flashbacks. Cool. Check off. They discharge from treatment. The problem is that that's not really the problem. There
Okay.
was something deeper that caused that to get stuck because other people could go through these exact same thing and not get stuck, right? So
Right.
you think like, why is it that this person cannot chew cereal and swallow it, but this person can? It's not the cereal that's the problem, right? It's that there's something going on in our ability to digest, and that's what we need to get curious about. So that's kind of where CMI we started looking at different modalities that were excellent at like single event traumas, looking at memory reconsolidation, looking at how our brain processes information and how we digest experience and how we develop a sense of self. All of these things, kind of like a big puzzle in search of kind of an algorithm. Because I figure if we can figure out how this happens, then we can work backwards. And that's essentially what we're doing with CMI is we're working backwards. And there's a lot of amazing modalities that, like, for example, this IFS, it puts everything in a metaphor of parts work. That's
Yeah.
great until you have an individual that's like, there's only one self because that's their spiritual belief. I agree with that. Like, you can metaphorically say this is another part and it works for the same purpose, essentially, sometimes as an illustration or a way for our this part of the brain to conceptualize something,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that that's the answer for all. Other modalities look for the negative cognition. Great, that's another path that you can take, but sometimes it's beneath the conscious awareness. You can't find the negative cognition, but the brain's going to find what you ask it to look for,
Yeah.
right? And that might not be where the answer lies. Other modalities look for a scene. Great if it's an explicit memory, but the more complex, nuanced things like I continue picking this or I just hate myself, how do you turn that into a scene? daily. Look in the mirror, wake up. Oh, shoot, I'm still here. Just what do you, but it's so complex. And those are the things that I wanted to understand is what is the common thread? And
Yes.
so with CMI, what we're looking through is not telling you, hey, it must be that, oh, you had an alcoholic mother, that must be a trauma that we got to address. I'm not identifying it. You're telling me, what about your experience now doesn't feel aligned, bothers you? And
Hmm.
even if you had this assault and that trauma and this, and you're like, I hate that when they run out of vanilla creamer at work, I just lose it. Seems
Okay.
like doesn't seem like a big deal, but to you it is. So that's where we start.
Okay.
When we go through the process, I'm really helping you tune into your body. The body holds the wisdom. The sensations, the tightness in your chest, the emotion response, all of that is data. Now, if you're a person who's like, I don't like this feeling, I'm going to go distract myself, or I'm going to breathe it away, or I'm going to erase it, or do something to make it go away, that's managing, right? But surface level, you never get to the root. You have to learn to tune into it to get to the root of where it's coming from, because that's the thread that's going to guide you to the truth about
Mm.
where this started. And so my role as a clinician isn't to tell you where the answer is, it's to keep the compass pointed in the direction of that signal. And
Hmm.
that is where I hold the space where it might get uncomfortable. And I'm like, it's okay, Lada, you can keep going. Yeah, yep, yep. Oh, that distress. Yep, that's normal. That's normal. Yeah, keep going, keep going. And an emotion actually only lasts about 90 seconds. I don't know if you know that. Uh, like neurobiologically, you're like, I've been pissed off since 92. I don't know what you're talking about. Like it doesn't, the reason the reason why it lasts, whenever we like keep it around is that we're resisting. We don't want to feel it, and so we keep pushing it down and it keeps persisting. Or it comes up and we start thinking about all the other things and add to it. We throw in that plate. And so we never really quite digest it. And so with CMI, we're kind of helping you set some parameters on there. Stay focused, stay on target, stay through that following that thread, and
Interesting.
recognizing when you get to that critical memory. And everything happens organically. You have the answers. You will know what you need at that point. It
Good.
it can
That's
happen.
interesting
Yeah.
because I know, like, myself and so many, clinicians who might be listening now, like, have those experiences of clients getting stuck. Like, it seems like one of those modalities that you just mentioned is like working, and then you hit a point where it's not working anymore, and you're like, do I pull in an intervention from somewhere else? Like,
And then are we following the fidelity, or we start, what is that called, where you feel like a fake uh co- um imposter syndrome, right?
hmm.
Because you're told you're the professional, you need to have the answers, or you need to pivot, or you need to do this, and it's stressful. That's a lot to
Hmm.
put on another human. We don't
Hmm.
know. We really don't know. We need to stay in the state of curiosity, but we need to follow the script. But be curious, but assess and identify the problem. It's like this constant flip back and
It's so
forth.
true.
So that was the piece that got me frustrated, because I'm like, what you're telling me to do doesn't match this thing, but you're saying I have to do it that way, but that doesn't match.
Yeah.
And you haven't taught me how to pivot. That
Yeah.
frustration is what led to us like, well, how does the brain work anyway? Why does this modality work? Why does that one work? But they don't necessarily cover all.
Yeah.
What aspect does it get? What aspect does this one get? And that's when it comes down to, there's different types of memories. There's different ways that memory
And
occurs.
you're really saying, and just to, for people who are like, what, that you could take a person from like like this creamer agitating them and help them through directing,
Hey,
like, the curiosity, what they're noticing in their body through different memories. Like, it's basically like under,
yes.
and then it's by staying with it, by staying with uncomfortable sensations, um, and just keeping, you're holding a space, they're going deeper and deeper, they're able to hit that kind of core
Critical.
memory or core feeling, some truth that resolves. Is there more? Is there a piece I'm
Yes.
missing?
No, that's exactly what it is. It's such a thing of beauty. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing, and we're both surprised. You make assumptions, and oftentimes they get to a memory that's like, that doesn't make sense. Let's just see. Just be curious, continuing being curious. And some people do need a little bit more guidance, a little more support. For the most part, we're teaching clinicians to stay out of the way. You don't know. They don't even know, much less you. Stay in that state of curiosity. When they get there, I can't tell you how many times after all the connections are made and they come back, it makes perfect sense, but
Mm.
not in the logical way, rather in the way of the experience, why the brain would have said, this feels like that. Right.
Oof.
The
It's very
vanilla creamer is the attention that you never got because your brother was the favorite.
right.
Never would have gotten that logically.
That's very interesting. Do you ever find that suppressed memories come up, or it's too much for the client to hold in the space, or
Yeah.
what kind of safety and container are you?
The safety and container is that we're not the expert. They are. So that
Mhm.
means that I'm not saying, give me your big T traumas, little T traumas, right? I'm finding, where do you have signals right now? And we're trusting that. Like, I just had a client recently that came in, was like, I have no trauma, I have no issues, I'm just here, to learn how to manage my partner who has all the issues.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. We all have one of those, like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we went through first CMI session, and it wasn't anything big. It was like, their response to the partners not wanting to join them on certain, there's a differentiation in their, or a discrepancy in their financial state, right? What they, how
Mhm.
they make financially, and she wants to do all this stuff, and he feels like, I don't want you to pay for me, but I don't want to go there. And it was just this thing,
Yeah.
is we go through, I mean, whatever it connected to didn't even become explicit. It, whether there was a scene or not, all I know is there was a shift, and we teach you to tune into those shifts,
Mm.
where she was able to come and look and says, I got to approach this differently. It no longer was the tightness in her chest or the pit in her stomach. It was this, and we call that constriction. And when you expand, you see new opportunities, you see different angles. And
Yeah.
that's what we're aiming for, is expansion. I don't have the answer, but for her to be able to say, I just need to approach differently. Cool. You're on auto therapy. You know how easy it is to do that type of therapy, where they
Right.
leave like with this aha, and I'm like, you
Yeah.
figured it out. I didn't figure anything out for you.
That's right.
Now
That's
she walked out. She said, hey, do you think we could do like this with my childhood, like sexual abuse? Yeah.
right.
But when they had no problems, I'm like, sure, why not? I didn't have to
Yeah.
say that or be like, you're being treatment resistant or you're not facing the thing you need to face. I'm following when they're ready. And they're going to be ready when they learn how strong they are. And they're going to learn how strong they are when you allow them to feel what they can handle, get to the other side of the discomfort, and surprise themselves. Then they
Mm.
get curious. Maybe I could do this. She just went from here to there. I'm like, all right, then let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, they're building, they're like, whoa, they're surprised at their capacity and what they can handle. They're
Yes.
building confidence. Um, and they're, like you said, the client's in charge, which, we've talked about this a lot on the show, is very important, especially for survivors of trauma. The whole thing is reminding them of their own power,
Yes.
and autonomy. I mean, that is
How many
that is,
modalities that have a script actually provide that space?
yeah,
Right, because they're going in and you're like, no, because the script says this is the next step, you can't just dip out or else you're not compliant. Do you really want to heal? Just all of these things that go through our mind, that what teaches you to tune into them.
right. I know there is a kind of, there's a tension. I mean, I think for me, being integrative like helps with that tension, but there's definitely a tension between like assessing and even the choosing of, like, this part of your brain as the clinician that's kind of making an analysis of what's going on, and then
Yes.
being with in the moment with the client, and there definitely is a tension there.
Yeah, and those are the things that, why we do a CMI, we work with the clinician first, is that you've got to be aware of your own signals.
Yeah.
So if I have some of my stuff that I didn't even know. Like I didn't know I had not processed. Like I had religious trauma I hadn't processed, but because the physical abuse, all this other stuff was so much louder that
Yeah.
this is like just gentle and it beyond, my conscious awareness, that not until we started regularly practicing looking for signals and moving towards them and discovering them, like, oh, I didn't know this was there. Holy crap, that actually hurt. And I thought I was fine. All of this integration happening, that it shifted how I approached clients too. All of a sudden, I started noticing signals that they had with certain
Oh,
traumas that I'm like, how did I not catch that before?
huh.
Because if it's outside of my conscious awareness, or I have something in me that's dampering that signal, I also damper their signal. Or if there's something that I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about alcoholism because that thing really hits home,
Right.
where we call that transference, countertransference. Well, that's happening anyway, but if you're not conscious of it and if you don't know what to do with your stuff so it doesn't get in the way of their stuff, then we get stuck in loops. We get stuck in these points and we don't know how to move, and we're looking for a modality, we're looking for a technique. Honey, it's you. It's not the technique. Like,
I
it's
love
me
that.
that's stuck, not my client. And once we know what to do with that and clear it, it's amazing. I come back, I'm like, oh, that was my resistance to that. Like for me, it was the victim. I love the fighters because it's what I did to survive. But if somebody got stuck in victim, I would be like, oh, this is so draining. Just get up. That was very judgy.
Yeah.
Just because their
Yeah.
survival mechanism looks different than mine doesn't mean the pattern isn't the same.
Oh, it's, yeah, that's an important one. So I
I know some
definitely,
of my some of my fellow clinicians probably just like, ouch, that hits the face. Yeah.
yeah, such a good point. I love this. What didn't I ask you about this method or about your work that is important to share before we close it? I definitely feel in some ways we just scratched the surface, but in other ways, we covered a lot more understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Everything that went into CMI was wisdom. So when people say, "Well, it's just a baby," because we just came out with it like a year and a half ago, it's a baby, but it's an old soul. It brings with it the wisdom of many other, in like people who stepped out of what we knew, and noticed things, and with the true desire to help. But we wanted to truly integrate the wisdom of different approaches and what we've learned in neuroscience, what we've learned about how memory works, the nervous system, kind of cross through to other uh, fields that normally we
Yeah,
don't do, and come up with how do we simplify. So the simplification and the sifting has been a lot of work, to really refine it so that it's replicable. And so that was exhausting, but
uh,
the exciting part is completely 100% worth it, because I feel so rejuvenated and just honored. I'm excited to go practice. Mondays and Tuesdays are the only days I get to practice because I get to see miracles. I get to see people come in and I'm like, bro, I don't even know, like, that level of complexity. And then 3 months later, they're discharging,
uh,
just happy and strong. And I had a vet that just did that. She's like, I'm going to tell you, when I first started and I told you I had 3 months, I didn't believe that you could help me. But it's been 3 weeks that she's like, I'm happy. I'm good. I'm doing this. I set these boundaries there. I recognize this over there. Going to get deported. What is it? Not deported. Deployed. Yeah, somewhere where she was scared before. She's like, I'm looking forward to it. And because I didn't waste any time hearing all the trudgy details of her traumas. It's like,
yeah.
let me show you where to find the answers. And we just went and went and went. And each time, all these aha moments. She's journaling,
Mm,
she's discovering. We don't have to waste time on you sharing that she can. And she did some of it, but we were
yeah.
like on an efficient route, and
I love that.
sure. Yeah, it's beautiful because I don't have to have the answers. So any
Right.
clinicians, yeah, don't think that you're replacing your tools. We're teaching you how to use them more efficiently, more intentionally, teaching you the pattern so that you recognize why this works here and that works, and which one will be best fit. Oh, I have one of those tools here, for your client, and it just makes our work so much more fulfilling. We teach you to do this on yourself as well, so that ongoing self-discovery, and pieces, it just helps you feel more, when you're more integrated, you live with more integrity. And when you have integrity, it increases your resiliency, so
Mm,
we go through adversity, we know how to respond. We're no longer fighting what's happening. Rather, we know how to be who we are despite what's happening. And that's the
Mhm.
beauty of it.
Wow.
So, yeah, and anyone that's interested, we do like free webinars on Wednesday, the first Wednesday of every month. And I'm happy to talk to fellow clinicians. That's what we did this for. We need to come together and support each other and help each other be just more efficient, more just share with each other the wisdom that we all learned so that we can help more people.
I love this. It's like a best of. And I love what you're talking about with simplifying, because actually we know that to be able to describe something in a simple way, it takes the most highest understanding of it, right? If you're able to explain it to someone as if they were a kindergartner, you have to really understand it. So you've definitely got my curiosity going, and looking forward to looking into this more. If people want to find you, work with you, learn from you, where can they do that?
Yeah, arisealliance.org. You can follow us. I believe we have an Instagram and a YouTube, but go to arisealliance.org and you'll find all the links there. And I'm happy to connect, happy to share. We're all in this together. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for connecting with me, Lada. And I know we persisted despite some of the challenges. That's life, I guess, right?
We had a couple Wi-Fi things, but I don't think anyone's going to even know by the time this goes through audio. So shout out as always to the team over here, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.